Hey there and welcome back to another Rings of Power video. And today we're going to be talking about episode 5, Partings. And so this episode officially marks us passing halfway through the first season. And honestly, I'm enjoying it so far. I came into the first episode with really low expectations and was expecting to be majorly disappointed. I didn't really think it looked all that good from the trailers. Visually it was great, but I thought the story would suck. And whilst the response has been mixed to say the least, I'm out here having some fun. I'm enjoying myself and I think it's good. But anyway, all that being said, let's jump into the video. And so we start off the episode back following the Harfoots after not having seen them for an episode or so, once again with Nori and Meteor Man, where we see that he's started to pick up a few words here and there, and is able to have some somewhat rudimentary conversations with Nori about what they're doing, where they're going, and how the way that they're going to get there is quite dangerous, a dangerous path. And then he tries to explain that he also thinks that he's dangerous. He's a danger to them. And all because he accidentally killed the fireflies, but Nori assures him that this wasn't the case, and that without him, her family would have been left behind, and they would be dead. And honestly, the more I see of this guy, the more convinced I am that this is supposed to be Gandalf. I know that it isn't the right time in the timeline for him to be here at all, but with the way that they're building up his relationship with the Harfoots, it really does give me the vibe that they've decided to play fast and lose big time with the timeline. Which, I don't really mind, but it would also be a really risky play. And I mean, maybe he's a blue wizard, but I just don't see them going in that direction for whatever reason. And I think it would be really weird for him to be Sauron after all of this. But anyway, this whole scene, it's very cute. Nori reassuring him that he's a good person who helps others, that he's not a danger. It's just all very sweet. And then they return to the group, where they all prepare for another day's journeying. And it's nice to see that he's really become part of the family. I mean, the mum even looks at him for reassurance that she doesn't snore after the rest of the family tells her that she does. And so then we get the Harfoot walking song, and damn it, this felt like it was straight out of the films, just a whole lot of fun. And we see that they're wandering down through what's going to become the Dead Marshes and along the northern border of Mordor, so it's clear they're going to get swallowed up into that part of the story, just like the majority of the other major characters, and then I suppose after that, their paths will again diverge for season 2. But anyway, just a really beautiful song, beautiful montage. Got me right in the feels. We then have a scene, including some new obvious villains, with 3 cultist type looking people arriving at the scene of the meteor crash, obviously searching for Meteor Man. But they come up empty before they notice the Harfoot footprints, so I suppose this means they're going to be coming after them at some point, probably acting as a mini villain for that arc and giving more hints for the eventual Sauron reveal. And speaking of which, we head over to LotR in the Southlands, who's clearly not Sauron, at least in my eyes. It just feels like it doesn't really fit in with the story that's being told. It's being presented as a mystery, so just outright telling us that this guy must be Sauron, it doesn't really fit in with that in my opinion. But anyway, he's standing out in the sunlight when he's approached by one of the orcs, telling him that the tunnel is complete. And then he forces said orc to hold out his arm in the sun and let himself cook for a little while, and laments that orcs are unable to feel the warmth of the sun, instead burning like they're on fire. And so, he says that he's going to change things to ensure that orcs have an ideal home. So we're pretty much about to get the birth of Mordor. And so LotR orders his orc to go and prepare, because the time has come. Time for war, I suppose. And speaking of war, Bronwyn at the tower tries to rally the people of the Southlands to stay at the tower and fight the orcs, but Waldrick, the tavern keeper, Sauron's #1 fan, tells the people that they should take their chances bowing to the orcs and join their army, pledging fealty to the darkness. Anyway, a big portion of the refugees leave the tower with Waldrick, including Theo's friend Rowan, but a portion of the humans still stay. But yeah, goes from hopeful to bleak in a blink of an eye. But luckily for our Southlands humans, or at least the ones that don't want to be subjugated to the rule of a Dark Lord, the navy of Numenor is on the way, as we cut to the harbour to see they've assembled a number of ships and are preparing to sail to war. And speaking of which, despite volunteering at the end of last episode, turns out Isildur's not on the list because half the city signed up and there's limited space, and thus, since he never actually made it onto the Sea Guard, there's no real reason for him to be chosen. Hell, there's all likelihood that his friends only made the cut themselves, because Elendil feels bad that his son got them fired from the Sea Guard. Anyway, since Isildur seems to have no real respect for serving Numenor, at least in Elendil's eyes, he has no reason to pull strings to get him a spot. And it was very nice to see that Isildur couldn't use nepotism to get onto the expedition. He actually has to prove himself first. Which, obviously he's going to, because it would be a bit ridiculous if he didn't go on this massively important mission when he has such an important part to play in the future. One way or another, he's getting on the ship. And then we cut to the royal court, where there's been some pretty heavy protests being levelled at Pharazôn, including some by his own son and Elendil's daughter, Aarion. But since he just brushes everybody off, she then goes to his son, her love interest, to complain that he must be made to see reason and side against the Queen Regent. And honestly, I'm wondering why she doesn't want this expedition to go down. Racism? Is she just afraid for her family? Does she have a belief that Numenor's above playing a part in the wars of Middle-earth? Honestly, I'm curious as to what it's going to be. Anyway, we then move on to see that Halbrand is now a guild member, and is working at the smith he saw when he first came into the city. And he's even made a blade, which looks damn good. I think even the Numenorian smith is impressed by the quality of it. And I'm sure this is getting more and more people to buy into him being Sauron, but honestly, I don't see it anymore. Personally, I think I'm fading away from that particular interpretation of the character. But anyway, he's then summoned to a council meeting with the Queen, Pharazôn, and Galadriel, where he gives them information about where the orcs have likely gone, and then kind of exposes that Galadriel's lied to the Queen, and that he's not on board with becoming King of the Southlands. And then on top of that, he's also not on board with actually going to fight the war at all, which throws Galadriel off a bit, and pisses off the Queen, as she is really staking her reputation on this expedition. So the Queen tells them to sort their shit out, and leaves. And then the two get into a little bit of a verbal tussle. Galadriel calls out Halbrand for selling her out to Pharazôn when she went to find the king, and he accuses her of using him for her own ends. But of course, she turns it around on him, showing off her manipulative side, and tells him that with a crown on his head, 5 ships and 500 soldiers coming to aid the Southlands, it could be argued that it was her that had been used by him, which in turn causes him to storm off, leaving behind his royal crest thing. And obviously, that won't last long. Anyway, we then return to the Harfoots, where they've decided to take a wander through the spooky forest, with it being told that the forest is far more empty than usual, and that there's wolves nearby. And if this is as close to the Southlands as I think it is, then I'd guess that this place has probably already been ravaged somewhat by the orcs. The old busybody then approaches the leader and says that the Brandyfoots should be left behind, and that it's the big man's fault that the forests are so empty. Before off she goes to pick mushrooms, where she's found by Poppy and Nori, who tell her that they found wolf tracks in the mud. Just as the wolves arrive and try to chase them down, only to be intercepted by the stranger, who chases them away using some ground and pound magic. Of course, this magic comes at the cost of hurting his arm. So yeah, I'm pretty convinced this dude's a wizard, and on top of that, I would say it's Gandalf. I mean, it could be one of the blue wizards as well, but Gandalf feels like what they're going for. I mean, hell, he even loves the hobbits. There's just so many connections here. But then it's back to Numenor, where the new recruits are practicing their swordplay, and bless them, they're trying their best. But Galadriel is pretty right to scoff at them that their strokes are way too heavy. They're putting everything behind every single hit, flailing around, stumbling, not much finesse at all. I can see why she fears that they're untested and thus will fail, and therefore, Elendil's suggestion that she helps them train makes a whole lot of sense. So she challenges a group of recruits, with Elendil adding the stipulation that if anybody gets a hit on her, they get a promotion to lieutenant. And so 5 of them give it a red hot crack, and they get absolutely dominated and publicly humiliated for a couple of minutes, before one of them manages to get a lucky hit and scratch Galadriel's dress, and thus earns the promotion. Not really sure he earned that promotion, but sure, why not? Honestly, this whole scene was kind of silly, but silly in an elven sort of way. The kind of ridiculous bullshit that you can only get away with if one of the characters is an elf. But hey, then Halbrand goes to pick up the sword, and he does some neat sword tricks before handing it back. So clearly, he's going to be no slouch either. Although at the same time, it also felt very forced. Why wouldn't he just pick it up normally? Why would he show off if he has no interest in fighting? Bit weird. We then cut to Pharazôn and his son, where the lad's trying to convince him to assert his influence over the Queen and bring an end to this talk of sailing to the mainland to fight the orcs. And Pharazôn basically hits his son with a "sit down, kid," and tells him that the public opinion's fallen firmly in favour of fighting this war and seeking glory, and that he's not going to stake his reputation by fighting against the tide. Pharazôn then reveals that he has a more insidious purpose behind his support for the war as well, that he wants dominion over the elves. He wants them subservient to the men of Numenor, for his people to be the true power in Middle-earth, with the idea behind his plan being that they're going to unite the men of the Southlands under their king, and then, once they've got a horde of humans indebted to them, a vassal in all but name, they can use them as an ally to fight the elves and conquer their lands. And on the surface, his idea is a good one. Have a strong ally in Middle-earth. But it's not that great that he wants to use them as a weapon, though. But anyway, it's clear that his son wants to keep up the isolationist ways, even after this explanation. So this is going to lead to some more conflict. But then we cut to the king, who's actually out of bed, and is ranting to his daughter that the kingdom's in danger, and that all that awaits in Middle-earth is darkness. And so it's clear that this dude has dementia, and has also probably spent too long getting into prophecy and all of that, so his mind's become a bit warped. But I'm feeling like he's already foreseen the sequence of events that begins with the Numenorians making war on the orcs that will lead to its ultimate downfall and destruction. And you know, this probably isn't a good thing for her to hear in this context because she's already given the order for the fleet and the army to assemble. But yeah, bad luck, Muriel. We then cut to the stranger in Nori, with the stranger trying to soothe his injured arm by putting his hand in a pool of water and saying some magic words to freeze it, and his arm becoming his own little ice pack. And of course, Nori then tries to win a Darwin Award by touching the magical ice that you obviously shouldn't touch, and then she starts to freeze too, before she gets blown back when he realizes what's going on, and she runs off on him because now she's scared. And yeah, I'm not sure what she was expecting here. Oh, and then the trees start to sway ominously, hinting at something more nefarious at work, although I still think that's a bit of misdirection. And then we come to one of the more awkward scenes in the episode, where there's a celebratory dinner party at Linden with the important elves and Durin, who can't resist throwing barb after barb and trying to scam them out of their fancy table, which he pretends is from a special type of rock specially used for tombs. Whilst the elves, Gil-galad in particular, keep probing, hinting that they know about Mithril and they want it for themselves. And meanwhile, Elrond, who just wanted a nice dinner with his friends, is just sitting there quite dejected. And so after the dinner ends, Elrond confronts the king and asks him whether he's been lying to him this whole time. And the whole reason he was sent to Celebrimbor was because they both knew that Elrond would suggest the dwarves and allow them to try and get their hands on the Mithril, which apparently they know about. And anyway, after a veiled insult with the king calling Elrond half-elf, which I feel like normally isn't an insult, but in this context probably is there to remind him of his place, he reminds him of an old legend, of a battle over a tree between a Balrog and an elven hero. Within the tree, there was supposedly one of the lost Silmarils, and thus they were both desperate. The elf wanted to protect the tree, the Balrog wanted to destroy it. And amidst their duel, lightning struck the tree, which formed Mithril deep in the caves below the site of the battle. And this Mithril was an ore that was the perfect balance of light and dark, good and evil. And with it, Gil-galad believes that they can use it to save their people. As their great tree is dying, it's corrupted. The light of the Eldar's leaving Middle-earth, leaving their people, and thus they will decay, their lands will fall into ruin, unless Elrond reveals what he knows. And that ultimately, if the elves are forced to flee to Valinor, the armies of darkness, so apparently he does know about the orcs and Sauron being still active, will simply sweep across the world and plunge the earth into darkness forever. But still, Elrond holds firm, and he won't break his oath, at least not without permission. And we then return to Numenor, where Isildur's friends are partying, and the peacekeeper of the group, honestly I've forgotten his name, is talking to his fiancée and is getting some major death flags. Talking about how the war will be over quickly, and that his soon-to-be father-in-law is already going about town, telling anybody who will listen about how his daughter's going to marry a war hero. It's sad, but I feel like this dude is going to be death fodder to up the stakes for Isildur's storyline, and honestly, same with the other guy. They feel like placeholders for Isildur's brother. But the blonde guy especially feels primed for a season 1 death. Anyway, they make up with Isildur in this scene after being allowed 2 free hits, but refuse to help him get on the expedition, and rightfully so. He wouldn't be in this position if he'd simply followed orders. He probably would have been accepted, so tough luck. Oh, and to add insult to injury, it turns out Isildur's horse has also been recruited onto the expedition. That's got to be a bit humbling. Even his horse is more qualified and respected than him. Damn. So, this leads to Isildur trying to stow away on one of the ships, whilst Pharazôn's son sneaks aboard to try and burn them at anchor so that the expedition fails. And they tussle, and this guy somehow catches on fire, and he's rigged the oil to explode, so as they try to escape, he knocks himself out by accident, meaning Isildur has to save him. Imagine if he just let him die. Anyway, luckily his plan was shit anyway, as the explosion only damaged 2 ships, and he almost died. But he backs up Isildur and claims that he saved his life, which is likely what's going to get Isildur onto the expedition. And so, as the council tries to figure out what went wrong, Galadriel wants to push full steam ahead and keep on schedule, whilst Pharazôn likely still wants to go ahead considering his plans, but he wants to also wait, to earn more public support, to win more hearts to the cause. But the Queen decides that the council's going to reconvene the next day to make their final decision, and that if Halbrand, who's mostly been absent, doesn't attend, it's going to be the end of it. We then return to Linden, where Celebrimbor offers Elrond an apology for not telling him about their need for Mithril, but that it had been an order from the High King himself, and he couldn't go against it. He then guarantees him that it's 100%, Mithril will be able to save their people if they can get a lot of it quickly, enough to engulf the elves in its light. And thus, they'll be able to reverse the corruption. And hey, he even doses him with a bit of a guilt trip by using the memory of his father against him, saying that he would always do what he had to do because he was the only one who could do it. Just like Elrond's the only elf who can do this now. But what is the plan here? Even if he tells them, the mines are in Khazad-dûm. How does he expect to get the Mithril? Invade? I'm a bit confused about this plot point. What if the dwarves just straight up told them no? Anyway, we then return to Numenor, where Galadriel's apologising for trying to use Halbrand, but then doubles down on the guilt, pretty much telling them that if he doesn't help her, his people are going to die, and the mission will be cancelled. And this prompts him to reflect on his past, and he tells her that he isn't the man that she thinks he is, hinting that he probably previously swore an oath to Sauron, or maybe Adar, and then he fled. And this is especially clear since they intercut his speech to her, talking about how they survived, with the scenes of the humans of the Southlands swearing fealty to Adar and the orcs. He implies that what he's done is pretty bad. Bad enough to have him thrown out of Numenor and abandoned by Galadriel if she ever found out, which I think probably confirms to her that he did serve Sauron. But she doesn't much seem to care. He's repented, and she knows that she can use him to fight back. They then bond over their shared angst and pain, and she wills him to do the right thing, to fight, as they'll both know no peace until this war is won. Which, well, it will probably work, let's be honest. Anyway, we then move on to Adar, where he's meeting Waldrick and the other kneelers, who pledge their undying loyalty and service to him, to Sauron. But whoops, this dude ain't Sauron. He doesn't seem to be like to be called Sauron, and I reckon he might even be an enemy of Sauron, because he beats up Waldrick, who of course quickly changes his tune to say he'll serve him instead. And then he's forced to kill Rowan, Theo's friend, to make a blood oath. See ya, mate. Looks like you're not going to see the true king return. I don't know, I kind of feel bad for him, but at the same time, it was sort of funny. Why would you ever think joining an openly evil army is ever going to end well for you? But now it's back to the Watchtower, where Arondir is trying to give Theo some tips in archery, but it's clear that there really isn't much hope. But Arondir still gives him a pep talk and tells him that the reason that he's staying to fight, and likely is going to die alongside them, is that he's come to see these people as more than just the descendants of Morgoth's servants, but as regular normal people. And thus, he's not going to abandon those who won't give in to the darkness. And this in turn earns Theo's trust, and he shows him the sword hilt, which is also conveniently pictured on a carving in the very same tower. And thus, Arondir realizes that it's likely a key that the enemy needs in order to shape the Southlands into Mordor, and to ascend to godhood. And he also realizes that they probably only have days until the orcs are able to assault the tower. Guess they gotta keep digging their tunnels to be close enough to attack by night and win before the dawn comes? Or do they just have a long way to walk? Do they have to scale the cliffs? Who knows? But conveniently, there'll be just enough time for the Numenorean army to arrive. But then on the other hand, he also says that maybe they only have hours? Pretty big difference, mate. And so Bronwyn starts to lose hope, and rightfully so. And she almost gives in. Before I think they both get the idea to collapse the tower. Is that what was hinted at? I don't know. Something like that. But then it's back to Lindon, where the dwarves are heading back home, and Elrond reveals to Durin that the elves need Mithril, lest their souls dwindle into nothingness, which means they need to abandon Middle-earth forever before that happens. Only Mithril can save them, and thus, only Durin can save them, which of course plays on his ego. And man, there really is a whole lot of manipulation going on in this episode. And thus he decides he'll help them, for the glory of it being the dwarves that saved the elven race. God, I love their friendship. It's very wholesome. I'm going to be sad when Durin inevitably dies. We also then see Halbrand have a change of heart and get all armoured up, and I'm very curious to see what they do with him if I'm being honest. And then so, off Numenor marches to war in a pretty epic scene. And I'm very excited to get some battles in the latter half of this season. God, this scene was just epic. Even if they did look a bit stupid in their helmets. I mean, some of them were crooked, come on boys. Anyway, off they sail, and the episode ends. And yeah, that episode was awesome, I loved it. Although, I'm a little worried about all the storylines converging. This is the make or break it part of the season now. And if they bungle it here, it'll be a disaster. So, I'm excited but nervous. And so I'll end the video here. And with all that being said, these were just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? Like it, hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know.